Hello plant people, my name is Nora, also known as the Leca Queen on Instagram. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a place where we talk about indoor plants, anything from Leca to moss spores. Today I'm going to be walking you through how I make a simple moss spore. And you know, I love moss spores. Got some of my gorgeous plants behind me, and all these plants are on a moss spore. So this is my snow queen that's living on a moss spore. So that's a moss spore back there. Satin pothos on a moss spore. El Salvador monstera on a moss spore. Golden ivy on a moss spore. I just love moss spores. They're absolutely beautiful. And I make all my poles. It's just cheaper for one, and it's easier to customize the pole to the plant when you can make it yourself. So I'll show you all the things that we're going to need. So we're going to need a piece of mesh. I like to use the soft metal kind of mesh, and this comes in a big roll like that. So it's like huge. It's really huge. You can have heaps, make heaps and heaps of balls from that. So I just cut that off, and it's very soft. All you need is a pair of scissors and you cut off what you need. Sphagnum moss. I like to soak my moss in the Growth Technology Foliage Focus or in Growth Technology Clonex Clone Solution. Just, you know, that's just that the moss itself is primed with a nutrient, so once the roots start to grow into it, there's something for them to eat. We will also need some cable ties, just small cable ties. We will also need a propylene sheet. So this is an A2 size sheet and it's 0.8 millimeters in thickness. I will put a link to all the items that I use below. And this is what I use behind my pole. Something to cut the sheet, and I've just got my cutting sheet there just to make things easier. I've also got a ruler just to help guide my cutting, and a hole punch or a perforator, depending on where you come from. I also like to use a metal rod. So I use this metal rod to provide stability and just to make sure that the pole is stable, strong, and not falling off. I'll show you why I do what I do in a second. I'll use my Snow Queen to demonstrate. What that sheet does is it keeps the moss moist for longer. So you can imagine you've got this, you reduce the surface area from which the water can evaporate off the moss, so it stays moist longer. But another thing that's really useful to have about this is the fact that once the roots start to come through the moss, they will start jutting out. What we want is the roots to go down and not jut out. So what this does is basically acts like a wall. So the roots will hit the sheet and they will start to grow down. So what we need to do is cut a piece of the sheet that will go behind that. So that's what we want to do, but we want this sheet to be curved. So we want the size of this sheet to be wider than that. So I will make this a bit wider. So about so much, just a few centimeters wider. This is a blade, so be as safe as you can be. And I will just slice. So I've cut off my sheet, and that's how that compares size-wise. So I'll be able to make a D shape like that and have that cut. You will use your hole punch to make holes in there, in the propylene sheet. So start right at the edge there, the corner there, making sure it's close to the edge. Punch a hole. That is what we're looking for. And then you are going to make 2 holes right at the top, like that. 2 holes on either end. And I will show you what we need those for in a minute. And that's what you'll have. You'll have 2 bottom one there and all across there, including on the other side. I will now demonstrate how I attach this mesh to that. So what you want to do is align the top of the mesh to that and wherever that ends. So we are now going to use our cable ties. I like to use cable ties because I just find it easier to work with. So you've got your cable tie and you are putting it through there and through there. So making sure that the head of the cable tie is against the sheet. And I will then secure the tie, and we've got something like this. So that's what that will look like. That is on the inside. So that is what that will look like. And this will be the inside. So that'll go on the inside. We will cup that like that, and those cable ties will be on the inside so that we don't have the heads of the cable ties jutting out of there. So we now have our sheet that has 2 holes at the top, 2 holes there, a hole there, a hole there, and holes throughout there, and holes throughout there. So you now grab your scissors and cut off the redundant bits of the cable ties. So just cut those. So that will look like that. That is the inside. Our moist moss. The moss is moist, not dripping, and we want to fill the pole with the moss. So you're not putting too much moss and you're not squeezing that in. You want to leave enough room for the roots to maneuver. You don't want the roots to be struggling to get into the moss, and you don't want them to basically be suffocated by the volume of that. So that basically will go like that. So like I said, you can tailor your pole to whatever plant you've got. You can make it smaller, you can make it bigger, you could do whatever you want, and that's the beauty of making your own poles. So I think for what I'm trying to do, this is probably more than enough moss. I'll leave that there. Get your cable tie, and we are starting again from inside the sheet into the mesh, and that goes in. That goes into the head of the cable tie. So we then fasten the cable ties, and as you can see, because we made the backing sheet wider than the mesh, it just naturally makes that D shape. Once again, scissors, cutting off the redundant pieces from the cable ties. Okay, so we're looking at, we've got something that is starting to look the business. What's really important at this stage is you've got these cable tie heads that are sticking out. If you left those like that and your plant starts to grow, you're then going to have torn leaves because those are sharp. So what you will then do is turn them inwards. So flick that in, and as you can see, that's a nice smooth surface. I can put my hand through there and there's nothing caught, whereas that cable tie there is still there. So all I do is just flick that forward into the moss and that's gone. So flick that forward, flick that forward. Again, there, and there. So we now have our moss pole. Smooth edges, no protruding cable tie heads, smooth edges. And if there's any protruding, all you need to do is just flick them in and they'll stay in. So you've got the entire length of the sheet at the back, you've got softly packed moss inside, and you've got this redundant piece of mesh. And because I put my plants in Leca, I need this in order to help my potting up. So that's it. This is your moss pole that you can attach your plant to, and as soon as you do that, you will then start to get magnificent large leaves on your plant. So my next video is going to show you how you can attach your plant that's living in Leca and put it in a pot. So stay tuned and thank you for watching.